Hello, hello, this is Fear Dragon coming at you with another StarCraft 2 netcast. Today we have a Terran versus Terran from the Dreamhack Valencia 2012 finals, and this is going to be between MilleniumForGG and LiquidTaeja. If you haven't seen game number 1, game number 2, or game number 3, please go ahead and check those out by clicking on the annotations below. But if you're still around, I'm going to assume you have, and we're going to go ahead and jump in and introduce these players here in game number 4. Spawning up here in the top right hand side of Antiga Shipyard, we have the blue Terran player representing Team Liquid. It is going to be LiquidTaeja, and he is going to be currently down one game. He's 1-2 against his opponent. Spawning down here in the bottom left hand corner of Antiga Shipyard as the red Terran, and he's going to be representing Team Millennium. It is going to be MilleniumForGG, the aggressive Terran, who has just been really showing very strong play in these past 3 games, and I'm really curious to see how he's going to play out this game on Antiga Shipyard. What kind of crazy stuff he's going to be doing, only time will tell, folks. Let's find out. Now, one thing I do want to note is MilleniumForGG going for that crazy aggression, going for the proxy barracks, and oh my god, if LiquidTaeja does not scout this out, he's going to be in a world of trouble. Now, we do end up seeing this SCV going out. He does end up, oh, there's the EAPM tab, but he sees it. He sees the proxy barracks, so LiquidTaeja forcing the cancel on 4GG's barracks, and oh my god, Taeja just instantly securing such a good position in this game. Now you can see over here, worker counting station, it actually looks pretty even, but here's the reality of the situation right now. 4GG is going to just be far behind in that barracks. He's actually just going to go ahead and potentially go for that command center first, just try and transition into that. So going from extreme cheese aggression of a proxy 2-racks to just a command center first. So we're going to see whether or not Taeja actually decides to punish this. You also have to remember that even though it might not seem like a big deal, 4GG is also down in a little bit of minerals just from having canceled that early barrack. So, you know, that command center first was even delayed, and that also is going to delay this barrack. So, you know, whatever kind of defense that 4GG tries to put up against what LiquidTaeja decides to do is going to be a little bit more delayed. But you know, that's actually not going to matter if Taeja doesn't decide to be super aggressive on 4GG. As you know, he should feel pretty comfortable knowing that his command center, his command center is relatively close behind his opponents. And, you know, the main thing is his tech will just be a little bit further ahead. We can see the barracks finished up, that marine going to be starting, and meanwhile 4GG only just now getting up that barracks, just finishing up, and actually I guess in place of not being able to produce that extra marine out as quite as early, he's going to go ahead and grab that early second second barracks. And we do actually see Taeja putting on a little bit of light pressure, and I really like this play from Taeja. Just with one SCV, he's forced 4 SCVs off of mining and delaying them from going over to that natural expansion. That's just such an awesome move from Taeja. I mean, it was a very low cost thing. We can see here in units lost, Taeja hasn't lost anything, and you know, it looks like 1 unit lost for 4GG. I don't think, no, that wasn't actually a work or anything. So probably just coming from, you know, probably one of the scouting workers or something of the sort. Actually, I'm not entirely sure. But the main point is Taeja doing a great job, just having a really good game sense. Oh my god, we see a very fast 3rd command center coming out from LiquidTaeja, and oh my god, he's going to be gearing up for that long macro game. And we do actually see he has grabbed both of those gas geysers. Wouldn't be too surprised to see him plop down a factory very soon, just to start getting up that tech play and potentially go up to Banshees, I want to say, just because of how early he actually grabbed both of these gas geysers. In comparison, we do see that the 2 gas geysers for 4GG just now finishing up, and we can even see having added on 3 of those barracks, is going to be transitioning into a much more biocentric style of play. You know, these cards are going to kind of be given away if Taeja does decide to scout out, as all of his marines are over at the front. So Taeja should have a good idea about it. And, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see, as it's very well known that that bio style of TVT does involve a lot more mobile play, that you want to go ahead and try and do constant drop play and all of this kind of stuff, pull your opponent apart and abuse your opponent's immobility if they're going for mech, which it looks like Taeja is likely going to be doing, as we do see that reactor swapping onto that barracks, the factory is swapping onto the reactor, I should say, and the Hellions going to be popping out in the relatively near future. And meanwhile, we also have that starport going up alongside that tech lab, so definitely going to be some additional Banshee play out of Taeja. I'm not at all surprised to see this out of him, as he's basically gone for those Banshees, cloak or without cloak, in every single one of these games. And, you know, it's absolutely not surprising to see him do it again. But, you know, one thing that we haven't really seen too much of is 4GG going for this Biocenter style play, or at least this kind of builder. Now, we do see Stim going ahead and researching. You know, he has a pretty hefty number of Marines, and I feel like Taeja's going to have to be a little bit careful, as you know, he does have to make sure that he keeps these Hellions very much so alive and doesn't want to take too much damage on them, just because they're going to be the thing that stops him from dying to any kind of really early aggression from 4GG if he decides to just push out with Stim finishing up, or even just Stim and combat shields. You know, Taeja does only have a couple of Marines, just a handful of four Hellions, and just 4 or 5 Marines out, getting a couple additional Marines, and actually going for Stim himself. So it looks like Taeja actually just using this mech style opening as a bit of a opening transition. Did get out of those 4 Hellions, and is now just going to sit on that tech lab with that factory. Going to go ahead and get out those siege tanks in the near future and just pick 1 Banshee, put on a little bit of pressure. And I really like this from Taeja, you know, having just 4 Hellions out on the map to seize control, just because they do very well in those low numbers where the Marines don't really have that high DPS to instantly start taking out all those Hellions. And, you know, also with the addition of that Banshee, he's going to be able to do some nice little damage in the back. Actually, 4GG trying to move out across the map. He's going to try and hit a little bit of a timing once Stim and potentially +1 finishes, but he has to be very careful because he's moving out with all of his Marines. That's going to leave his mineral line so vulnerable. Look at this juicy mineral line for LiquidTaeja, and here we actually see 4GG just saying to hell with it. I'm just going to go for it, use whatever Marines that do end up coming back. We do see the Banshee getting up to 7 kills actually before it gets taken out, so, you know, that's definitely not anything that the Banshee should feel shameful about. Is getting 7 kills on a Banshee is a pretty awesome trait, in my opinion, for Taeja. And now Taeja just has to make sure that he is able to defend this. He does actually have that 1 Hellion over there at the watchtower, but we do see 3 of the Hellions back over at home, and they're going to be doing so much splash damage, and 4GG's army just dissipated instantly. And even with these Hellions, they're going to be able to chase down these stimmed units from 4GG, so definitely making use of those Hellions early on. He does end up losing that 1 Hellion over the watchtower as 4GG pushes out once again with those Marines and Marauders. We don't actually see a starport on the way just quite yet, just adding on additional barracks and finally getting up that factory to eventually get that starport. But that's going to mean that 4GG is going to have to be very careful about all of these stims that he's going to be doing with his army, just because, you know, not even having combat shield finished up, just going to be finishing up right now. That means that his Marines are going to have a lot less health. They cannot afford to take too much damage from those stims, and even getting a couple of good shots off with those Hellions. Unfortunately, they do all get picked off, and oh my god, where is Taeja's army? We do see actually the siege mode already done. Going to get landing some really nice shots off with those siege tanks, but we do actually end up seeing a lot of damage being done by 4GG, sniping off quite a few of those tech structures, but ends up actually losing a pretty substantial portion of his army. And I have to question whether or not that was worth it. We can see over here in the viewing time station that we can see Taeja just has 3 siege tanks and a pretty hefty number of Marines, actually outnumbering the number of Marines from 4GG. But the one thing 4GG does have is he has a lot of those Marauders, and, you know, he's staying relatively even with the SCV count. Just a slight lead of 3 SCVs. But I mean, again, Taeja has that very scary army, and even going to be loading up 2 medevacs to do a little bit of drop play. I'm not actually sure how much I like this decision right now, just because he knows that his opponent still has a pretty substantial army. Going for that bio style play, he should also be able to get over to the back of his main very quickly. And meanwhile, Taeja just going to be kind of sectioning off his army a little bit, whereas the main advantage he has right now does lie in those siege tanks. But we do actually see those 2 medevacs popping in, seeing that there's no damage that they can do right now, as those Marines are well positioned from 4GG. He's going to have to go ahead and back off, and I think pretty luckily for both those players, no one really ended up losing a whole lot. We do actually see both these players getting up those 3rd expansions. All of those mules going to be calling imbalance from I can just hear all the Protoss and Zerg players just crying imbalance about this. Let's just take a look at the income for these 2 players. Look at that, 3,000 minerals per second from this many mules, and yeah, that's pretty strong. That's a pretty strong strategy, I think. But I mean, the main thing I will say though is that relatively even economy once again, and again, LiquidTaeja going for the slightly less mobile style of force, but that is going to mean he's going to do better in those direct engagements. We do actually see 4GG positioned in the center. He's actually going to have to back up, but you know, just having his army out in the center really does do a lot for him. You have to see LiquidTaeja actually has to siege up his siege tanks over here and then immediately unsiege them as soon as he sees that 4GG is retreating. So just constantly delaying this push from LiquidTaeja is going to be really to 4GG's advantage. And we do actually see that finally that siege tank production for 4GG is actually starting up, as you know, once it gets to the later and later stages of this Terran versus Terran, you don't want to be sitting on pure Marine Marauder. You want to mix in a couple of siege tanks in there just to be able to deal with this kind of giant Marine forces. Marines do a lot of damage, guys. I mean, you kind of need that splash damage to compete with your opponent if they have a lot of those siege tanks. And we do actually see LiquidTaeja gearing up to be in a very nice position. As we can see over here, the Marines actually just are doing a ton of damage from LiquidTaeja, but look at that nice splitting done by 4GG. The siege tanks from LiquidTaeja just a little bit too far back, and it looks like actually 4GG gonna come out just barely a little bit further ahead. As we can see, he has enough Marines to do these kind of nice drop plays right on top of those siege tanks, so doing some friendly fire to LiquidTaeja's own army. And now with a couple of additional Marines over here, it's going to put an end to 4GG's ability to do those kind of drop plays. But we do actually see that LiquidTaeja ends up losing quite a few of those Marines. I'm not sure how worth it was for 4GG. It's still relatively in there. I still think both these players have a good shot at this, but really, I have to say, really nice positioning on these buildings from 4GG. We can see none of them are really going to be too vulnerable to the siege tanks, but we still have to be very careful about this drop play coming out from Taeja. Actually, a really nice pickup from Taeja, actually picking up all of those Marines before losing any more than just one of them. And, you know, meanwhile, while this game is starting to pick up, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the upgrades. You can see 2-2 on the Marines of LiquidTaeja. Meanwhile, 2-2 for 4GG as well. So really staying even with those bio upgrades. And we do actually see LiquidTaeja having a bit of an advantage and going to go ahead and press it with that Marine count, able to snipe up 2 of the tanks for 4GG and only 2 tanks remaining for 4GG. So he has to be very careful, but it looks like he just wants to go in. He's advancing a little bit further forward, able to get out some really nice hits on Taeja's army, and this is just siege warfare at its finest, just small inches forward as both these players are fighting for every single inch you can get. Look at how closely these siege tank lines are going to their opponent's siege tank line. They're just barely out of range, and look at this. Looks like Taeja wants to go ahead and advance in once more. He's going to go ahead and snipe off that siege tank. No! Not able to get it. Oh no, losing so many of those Marines, and that's actually going to set Taeja a little bit behind, but you know, Taeja still has a really fantastic positioning with this siege tank line, and he is stopping 4GG from being able to set up his own counter opposition line. And we do actually see that these siege tanks, oh my god, so close to be able to take out some of this Taeja siege tanks, but just barely staying alive and actually going to be able to repair those up. Taeja going in once again as he sees that siege tank is a little bit vulnerable, but unfortunately he's going to lose a ton of his Marines in the process. But still, just having this many siege tanks means that 4GG can just never really try and engage Taeja's Marine count, as long as he just has enough of those siege, or as long as he keeps the Marine count for 4GG just barely low enough. Now we do actually see a 4GG gearing up to do a little bit of drop play from the side, as we actually see Taeja going ahead and moving up to the 3rd expansion. This is going to be so dangerous for 4GG. He has to get some kind of siege tank positioning up over here and just to be able to defend his 3rd. But we actually see Taeja has already secured that position, getting up a siege tank of his own on that high ground. And oh man, it looks like this might be it. 4GG is going to have to just go for it. He's pulling the SCVs. He's moving in the Marines. Taeja backing up into the security of his siege tank line, and he's going to be able to do an insane amount of damage. Just look at all those SCVs disappearing. But it looks like 4GG might actually be able to clean this up. We can see that the Marines have been cleaned up for 4GG, but it looks like LiquidTaeja able to clear up the remaining army of 4GG as well, and there's going to be the GG coming out from 4GG. So wow, just amazing contain coming out from LiquidTaeja. And you know, 4GG just played that out beautifully, just trying to buy every little inch that he could, making sure that Taeja was not able to just snipe off his siege tanks willy-nilly, and making sure that every single time he tried to, he definitely had to pay for it with losing a lot of those Marines. But I mean, ultimately, Taeja just played that little siege tank line game a little bit better, was able to finally secure this amazing positioning over here at the 3rd, and forced the engagement out for GG. Once he got over here and had those siege tanks positioned on this high ground and had those Marines starting to come in over here and start doing a little bit of damage to that third, 4GG could not sit idly any longer. And that actually forced that reaction that he had to pull all those Marines, pull all those SCVs, and Taeja pulled back to his siege tank line and just took the game, took the army, and very well played. And that's actually going to tie this series up 2-2. We're going to the rubber match, that ace match, and I am so excited considering that we came from a 2-0 lead from 4GG from game number 2, and now we're over here going into game number 5 in a tie. So LiquidTaeja coming back in this series, but you know what? It's very difficult to win 3 games in a row, so I'm really curious to see whether or not LiquidTaeja can pull the momentum victory, getting those 3 wins all in a row, just securing that victory and taking Dreamhack Valencia 2012. Or if 4GG is going to say, no, I'm not letting you do this any longer, and I'm taking back what's rightfully mine, and he's going to go ahead and do that. Even Navi saying to just, hey, listen up, because we're going to go ahead and jump into game number 5. I will see you guys there.